Definition of a resume: a short summary account of one's career or qualifications, prepared typically by you. I'm Mark Miner. I manage military and diversity recruiting for CSX Transportation, America's largest East Coast railroad. Put on your desk a GI Jobs magazine reprint. It's got a couple articles on us. But most importantly, on that, when you flip that open, you've got a list of the top 50 GI Jobs military-friendly employers right there. About 85% of these companies have personnel that are specifically and solely tasked with hiring veterans and working with veterans. So if you're looking to work for a corporation, I would start with this list. Notice CSX is number 8. Also, something to think about, especially when you're doing resumes, is how what you do transfers into the career you're seeking. And you want to be specific to the job as well as to the organization. But keep in mind that every organization is different, whether it's a federal agency, a private company, a large corporation. Everything has its own culture, and there's not one standard resume that's going to work for you moving forward. Every time you apply for a job, you're going to do a new resume. You're going to tailor it. You have to. You've got about 5 seconds. Somebody's going to look at that resume. They're going to decide whether it's going to go in the trash or they're going to keep reading it and pursue you. I've seen guys come into an interview with a suit and tie and a completely squared away resume trying to be a mechanic, and I'm sitting next to a hiring manager who says, I don't want him. He won't get down and dirty. His resume, he's too sharp, he's too polished. So you got to think about things like that. And the reason I have a job is for you to come to me and say, this is the job I'm going for with your company, what do I need to do? And I'll coach you. And like that top 50 list, most of them have military recruiters, this is what they do, all right? So keep that in mind. You want your personality to come through, and this goes back to culture. You want to tailor your personality to that culture. I mean, I'm not saying you should try and be something you're not, but for instance, at CSX, first thing I want to see is safety. Every company's got something they're looking for, okay? You study your organizations you're pursuing, tailor it to them. Your objective statement with CSX is the first line should be, I want to work with a safe organization. Boom. I'm going to keep that resume. You get a guy that's got a standardized resume that he's given to everybody, it's going to be obvious. You obviously aren't interested very much in my company. That's the perspective of the recruiters you're working with, okay? Attitude is essential. Attitude, believe it or not, is going to come through on a resume. Chris talked a little bit about what I call the entitlement phase, about processing. You got to understand, you're competing with 250,000 transitioning veterans every year. That's not even getting into the civilians. 250,000. I know when I go out for my company, I'm looking for the top 1% because I'm personally liable if I put Joe in a job where he's not going to be successful and it doesn't work out. All right, 250,000. So keep that in mind. You need to be humble. You need to do research. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of effort. And if you don't put it in, it's not going to happen. All right, it's just the reality of the situation. You need to be realistic. I can't tell you how many E4s I get applying for director jobs. It's crazy. Be realistic. You need to look at what you've done, where you're at. Be realistic, be honest with yourself, and determine goals that are realistic as well. One of the biggest things I do is help you manage expectations. All right? If you don't have a degree and you're lower enlisted, you have a ton of opportunity, but you're not going to step into an $85,000 a year job. You're going to have to work your way up just like you did in the military. You're going to start out in E1. All right? A lot of companies will waive education requirements for military experience, but you're going to have to start at the bottom, work your way up. So read job positions, read the qualifications they're asking for, and don't think they're going to make an exception for you. It's going to go in the trash. When you see a job posting on the internet, that is the standard, okay? And that's what you're tailoring your resume to if you meet that standard. Does that make sense? If it says there's a degree required and you don't have a degree, they're not going to make an exception. They can't by law, at least in the private sector. I can't speak for the federal government. So keep that in mind. So what you're doing is you're determining your skills, identifying your goals. You have to be able to market your assets and evaluate your options. And you're putting this in 2 pages. You're putting in multiple years of life and experience in 2 pages, and you've got 5 seconds to make something happen, all right? So you got to keep that in the back of your mind. How you adapt to new situations and tools that will allow you to fit in, all right? You want to emphasize the team. No matter what you're doing, even our freight conductors who are by themselves all the time, they need to be team players. Whether you're going to work for Merrill Lynch, Coke, whatever it is, team is important. Safety is important. Those are things you want to keep in mind. Again, keep in mind most companies won't want a resume. I want to emphasize that. When you go, you want to make it though, and you have to have it for an interview. You go to an interview, bring 5 resumes with you, at least. Be ready for everyone on that panel, and know your resume. That's important too. Know your resume. And don't worry, I will get into how to make it. But when you're making it, you got to keep these things in mind. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down in front of a guy, and I've got his resume, and I'll ask him about an employment gap, or ask him about something specific on his resume, and he doesn't even know what I'm talking about. Know your resume. Know what you're putting on there. Have your time frames completely squared away, all right? If you get caught off guard, you have no excuse. You should know exactly who you are, what you've done, and how you're presenting that, all right? You need to practice. Practice interviewing with your resume. Get somebody, just have them hammer away with questions based on your resume. All right, so there's different types of resume formats. And like I said, every organization, every recruiter has a different idea of what the right resume is, all right? You've got chronological resumes, target resumes, functional resumes, and combination resumes, and you don't necessarily need to know specifically what each one is. Basically, a functional resume is for somebody that doesn't have previous employment. In other words, somebody coming right out of high school, never been in the military, never went to school, never had a real job, okay? This is for people with gaps in employment. Nobody in this room should be worrying about a functional resume. I look at a functional resume, there's a problem. This guy was either in jail, never had a job. It's very vague. Trash. It's going in the trash. I like reverse chronological resumes. All right? And I'll show you the format a little bit. But in other words, you're going to have an objective statement, an objective summary, and then you're going to have what you did today, working all the way back, usually within the last 10 years. All right? Combination resume, you're kind of just mixing up the different types of resumes, but you definitely want to stick to chronological format. That recruiter's going to want to see how long you were at each organization. You may have a guy that was in the military for 4 years. He got out, and since he's had 6 jobs in 2 years. Red flag. That's why that recruiter, if they don't see that chronological order of what you've done, where you've been, they're going to automatically assume the worst. Okay? Keep that in mind. Anybody have any questions so far? All right.
Yes, actually I do. I've been in the military for 19 and change. When I do get out, I'll have 20.
Right.
Do you want to go back 10 years or do you want to go back 20?
I want to see the last 10 years. You can do that first 10 years in one bullet. 3 sentences. You know? But what you want to get in the most recent 10 years is the different commands you've had. In other words, you were an E6 doing this. You were an E5 doing this. That's what I want. And how you've progressed into leadership roles. Okay?